Hey guys! Tonight we're heading deep into the warm, dusty corridors of an Egyptian tomb. You step inside, torchlight flickering, brushing against the painted walls, eye level with images of gods, cats, and toothbrushes. Well, sort of. In the next few minutes, you'll hear why even the afterlife wasn't safe from plague, and why ancient Egyptians thought oral hygiene was sacred enough to carve into stone. Now, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what you do here. And if you're joining from somewhere cozy around the world, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far we travel together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You kneel down before a limestone tablet, your knees making a soft crunch on sand and shell chips. The carving shows an elegantly robed man, arms raised toward the gods. But off to the side is something unexpected, a long-handled tool hovering near his mouth. Archaeologists think it might represent an early dental instrument, a tool for the afterlife. Because here's the thing, ancient Egyptians were obsessed with preparing the dead for eternal comfort. That meant food, clothes, protective amulets, and even dental hygiene. Yep, they believed two duchess follow you beyond the grave. Which is pretty terrible news if you've ever had one and hoped dying might finally make it stop. Some tomb inscriptions included requests for dental powders, tongue scrapers, or oils for the mouth. And grave goods, those little offerings stocked beside the body, sometimes included containers of strange pastes and brushes. Even the gods, like Thoth or Sekhmet, were sometimes invoked to protect the mouth or banish pain from teeth. Historians still argue whether these items were practical or symbolic. Maybe the deceased expected to actually brush in the afterlife. Or maybe it was just good PR, an ancient, look at how clean my teeth are. Osiris, kind of deal. Either way, you're starting to realize that teeth mattered a lot more back then than most people think. You move further into the tomb and find a mummy, bandages stiff with resin. Teeth barely visible, but under the papery wrappings. Forensic scans often reveal the same thing, damage. Ancient Egyptian skulls frequently show worn-down teeth, cracked molars, and exposed nerves. Yikes. It's almost like the whole civilization lived in low-key dental agony. And still, they persisted. Some researchers believe dental care was so respected it earned a special class of practitioners, SWNW. Or, healers, who may have had a subspecialty in teeth. Others think the average Egyptian just powered through the pain, chewing on hairs or reciting spells for relief. Quirkier still, certain tombs even included models of tiny dental scenes, like a man leaning back while another pokes at his mouth with a curved stick. Dental dioramas, if you will. Maybe it was part of a ritual. Or maybe it was just a pharaoh's ancient flex. I had a guy for that. But don't get too smug. You reach up and touch your own teeth, clean, smooth, freshly brushed, and realize something strange. Despite all our modern tools, our ancestors weren't entirely clueless. They had some idea what they were doing. And we're only just beginning to uncover their logic, their methods, and their occasionally horrifying ingredients. Oh, and in case you were hoping for a gentle glide through rosy history, spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this if you're squeamish. Crocodile dung makes several surprise appearances, as do things like powder dog's hooves and burnt eggshells. Because nothing says, minty, like farmyard ash in your gums. Still, as your torch dims and the desert wind whistles through cracked stone, you can almost hear whispers of healers grinding powders by lamplight, of priests muttering spells for aching moods, of villagers rinsing with river water and hoping for the best. And so begins your strange descent into the toothpaste tombs of ancient Egypt. Sand in your sandals, skulls at your side, and not a single bottle of Listerine in sight. You step back from the tomb wall and squint at the half-worn carving of a man mid-chew. His mouth open just wide enough to suggest discomfort, or maybe confusion. You can almost hear him wondering, why do my teeth hurt all the time? Well, you're about to find out. Let's talk bread. In ancient Egypt, bread was everything. It was the backbone of the daily diet, eaten by laborers and royals alike. But here's the catch. Egyptian bread wasn't soft and fluffy like what you might toast for breakfast. No, it was dense, tough, and absolutely packed with grit. Not seasoning grit, not fancy salt flakes. We're talking stone grit. That's because the grain, usually emmer wheat or barley, was ground between sandstone or granite millstones. Over time, tiny fragments of stone would break off into the flour. These microscopic rock particles, invisible in the dough, would end up in every bite. Think of it as the world's earliest exfoliating toothpaste. Except you swallowed it. So, every time an Egyptian took a bite, they were unknowingly grinding their enamel down, little by little, meal by meal. It's no wonder the average skull shows molars ground flat, often exposing the dentin underneath. And remember, no painkillers. No ibuprofen. Just raw nerve endings. Day in, day out. Historians still argue whether this dental destruction was considered normal, or whether it was just the price of survival in a sandblasted world. Some suggest elite classes tried to avoid it with finer flour and better sifting, while peasants accepted the pain as part of life. Others believe no one really understood the cause at all, they just thought toothbrushes were fate. You dock into a reconstructed village scene, sunlight filtering through reed mats. The air thick with smoke from baking ovens. A woman kneels near a fire, slapping discs of dough onto a clay griddle. A child runs past, chewing something that might be grain and might be gravel. His teeth are already starting their lifelong battle. But despite the pain, Egyptians loved their bread. It wasn't just food, it was currency, temple offering, and comfort. It was buried with the dead and taxed by the state. Some workers were even paid in bread and beer. So giving up grain wasn't an option. Instead, you notice, they adapted. You find evidence in archaeological layers, toothpicks made from wood, ivory, or even gold, tucked into burial bundles. You see where marks on molars so even and smooth they could pass for industrially machined surfaces. Your own teeth ache in sympathy. And then there's the sand. Not just in the floor, but everywhere. It blew into everything, clothing, water jars, even the food bowls. You imagine taking a bite of lentils only to discover a pleasant crunch of quartz. Surprise. Kirkier still. Researchers once found a mummified crocodile with bread fragments lodged between its fossilized teeth, possibly a temple offering gone wrong. Or a snack shared with the local god. Either way, that croc died crunchy. The sand bread dilemma became so notorious that modern dental historians actually coined a phrase for it, the Egyptian milling problem. As if it were a software bug and not a nationwide chewing hazard. But hey, at least they weren't chipping teeth on popcorn kernels. You pass by a small display of ancient tooth relics, blackened, cracked, ground flat like slate. Some even show signs of abscesses, tiny pockets where infection had burrowed into the jaw. Imagine the pressure building, the fever, the swelling, all from what started as an innocent breakfast roll. Even royalty wasn't safe. Studies of pharaonic mummies like Ramses II and Amenhotep III show severe tooth wear and signs of chronic dental disease. So if you're picturing gold-plated grins and flawless smiles under those ceremonial masks, yeah. Think again. Yet for all the pain, there was a kind of resilience in it. You sense that Egyptians accepted their fate with a grit-toothed smile, perhaps literally. Maybe they even found beauty in the endurance. After all, statues rarely show teeth at all. Closed lips, calm faces, stoic, wise, slightly sandblasted. One fringe theory, still debated, but too weird to ignore, suggests that some of the earliest dental modifications in Egypt may not have been medical at all. Instead of fixing broken teeth, a few people might have deliberately filed theirs into shapes. Not vampires exactly, but ceremonial points, or symbolic grooves. Hey, fashion hurts. So next time you roll your eyes at the dentist asking if you floss daily, just remember this. At least your bread doesn't come with embedded boulders. And your gums aren't marinating in powdered limestone. You step out into the dry wind again, brushing imaginary flour dust off your sleeves. The Nile sparkles in the distance, calm and bright, but your jaw still clenches. Just a little, at the thought of beating down into ancient bread. Your path winds along the banks of the Nile, past some bleached stones and that upon swaying in the lazy heat. The breeze is warm, but the scent it carries? Pungent, earthy, kind of, wrong. You wrinkle your nose as you follow the trail toward an open-air market where clay pots sit neatly on woven mats, each filled with mysterious powders and pastes. Welcome to the original toothpaste Isle, circa 1500 BCE. You squat beside a merchant who's proudly stirring a paste in a wide alabaster bowl. It's grayish-green and thick, with a consistency somewhere between clay and regret. A gestures for you to sniff it. You shouldn't have. Ancient Egyptian toothpaste didn't exactly aim for minty freshness. Instead, it prized effectiveness, whatever that meant in a world without microscopes. The ingredients list, when scrolled onto papyri or painted inside tombs, reads like the recipe for a forbidden potion. Crushed rock salt, dried iris petals, burnt exhale, sometimes powdered ox hooves, and yes, crocodile dung. Historians still argue whether this dung was symbolic, antiseptic, or just another example of, seems weird but let's try it. One theory holds that its inclusion was inspired by crocodiles' uncanny ability to avoid mouth infections despite raw meat diets. Another theory suggests the ammonia in the dung helped kill bacteria. A third, less flattering idea, maybe they just thought it scared away tooth demons. You pick up a carved wooden spoon and dip it lightly into the paste. It clings. The texture's gritty, the color uninviting, but apparently, this goop was prized for its ability to scrub the teeth, strengthen the gums, and, supposedly, please the gods. Or at least distract them long enough for you to die peacefully. One of the oldest dental care recipes comes from a papyrus now held in Vienna. It describes a powdered mix of rock salt, mint, iris flower, and pepper, ground finely, then applied to the teeth with a moist finger. Sound promising? Well, one modern dentist who recreated it for fun said it worked surprisingly well. Once you got past the burning. And that burning? It wasn't accidental. The pepper and salt created a mild abrasive and antiseptic effect, which probably did help clean the mouth, though not without making your gums feel like they'd been chewed by a jackal. But hey, pain often meant progress, right? You duck under a canopy and watch as a healer mixes ash from burnt ox hooves with dried hairs. Folds in a few drops of mirror resin and stirs it into a paste. Isn't wearing gloves. The spoon licks to test consistency is deeply unsterile. You're getting the sense that germ theory wasn't quite there yet. And still, the whole operation ums with care. These weren't random combinations. Egyptians knew their plants. They harvested chamomile for inflammation, frankincense for its antiseptic smoke, and iris roots for strengthening teeth. Myrrh, meanwhile, had antimicrobial properties and smelled, well, better than dung. Even the ash, though alarming, had its reasons. Burnt materials create alkaline substances, which can neutralize mouth acids. It's a logic echoed millennia later in homemade baking soda pastes. Of course, baking soda doesn't require you to torch a hoof. You spot a boy watching you nearby. His lips stained slightly green. He's been chewing a wad of fresh hairs, likely parsley or mint. It was common practice to carry such sprigs, both for fresh breath and to chase off bad spirits thought to enter through the mouth. Remember, toothbrushes weren't just medical, they were mystical. And then there's the fringe stuff. A few rare texts mention powdered mouse bones or earth from a grave of a just man. Now, historians debate whether these were real treatments or symbolic gestures tied to ritual cleansing. But you're imagining someone in pain being told to go dig up saintly soil. Suddenly that $3 tube of Colgate seems like a steal. By the way, it wasn't just about brushing. These pastes were often part of larger ceremonies, especially when preparing a corpse for burial. Clean teeth were seen as a mark of purity. So even in death, you weren't excused from your dental routine. Someone would smear your gums with paste to make sure you entered the afterlife with a dazzling, if gritty, smile. A fringe theory suggests that some of the ingredients, like burnt myrrh and iris root, may have even functioned as mild anesthetics. Whether that was intentional or a happy accident? Scholars still debate. But you can imagine the relief, even momentary, of having something numb the constant throw behind your molars. You stroll past another market stand and find something shocking, an intact alabaster jar. Sealed tight. Inside is a preserved lump of ancient paste, dried to a near rock. When modern scientists analyzed samples like this, they often found mineral traces consistent with ash, plant oils, and calcium compounds. No fluoride. Sadly. What does it all mean? That even thousands of years ago, people were experimenting. Desperate. Yes. Innovative. Absolutely. Some of it worked. Some of it probably made things worse. But none of it was careless. You take a deep breath, which now smells faintly of iris and ammonia. You've just learned that the world's first toothpaste didn't come from a lab, but from the temple, the hearth, and the crocodile swamp. You wander away from the crowded market, your thoughts still swishing with crocodile dung and crochet iris. When something catches your eye, an elderly man sitting in the shade, hunched over with a stick in his mouth. He's not eating it. He's not talking. He's slowly chewing and turning it in circles, like a sleepy goat savoring a particularly woody popsicle. This, believe it or not, is ancient Egypt's answer to your electric toothbrush. Before toothbrushes had plastic handles and rechargeable motors, the Egyptians relied on something far more humble: twigs. Not just any twigs, though, special ones, selected for their texture, flavor, and, sometimes, mildly antiseptic properties. Think of them as nature's Swiss Army brushes. The most popular of these was the Salvadora persica, later known as the toothbrush tree. But in Egypt, they used a range of twigs from local shrubs, date palms, and even aromatic plants like cinnamon bark or sweet acacia. You watch the man gently bite the end of the stick until it fries. Then use the plate fibers like bristles to rub along his gums and teeth. It's surprisingly effective. Studies in modern times have shown that chewing sticks, or miswax, remove plaque, stimulate saliva, and even contain antimicrobial compounds. Some dentists today say they're just as good, if not better, than plastic brushes, provided you don't accidentally have the back of your throat. Of course, sticks weren't the only tool in the box. You pass a sunlight courtyard where women are soaking strips of linen in herbal oils, then twirling them into tight rolls. These may have been used as early dental wipes, pressed gently along the gum line or teeth to remove buildup. Primitive floss? Maybe. Moist towels for your mouth? Definitely the vibe. And sometimes, people just used their fingers. That's right, wet the tip. Dip it into powdered ash or crochet hairs. Then scrub as best you could. You try it with a dab of dusty mint powder. It's oddly satisfying, messy, sure, and probably full of bacteria, but satisfying. Historians still argue whether these finger brushes were common among the lower classes or reserved for ritual cleansing. There's little direct evidence, no fossilized fingerprints on molars, unfortunately, but the logic checks out. When in doubt, use what you have, and if that means massaging your teeth with your pinky and a bit of thyme, so be it. One papyrus even hints at a slightly more refined implement, a reed stick shaped and notched at the end, possibly to aid in cleaning between teeth. It's not exactly a water pick, but in a world where sugar was rare and sand was plentiful, it might have been just enough to keep decay at bay. And then there's a very weird one. Some ritual texts describe chewing on natron crystals, those chalky, salty minerals used in mummification. The idea was that natron, already sacred and preservative, could dry out evil from the mouth. Whether that was spiritual evil or literal infection? Scholars still debate. You watch a group of boys chewing thin strips of licorice root. It's sweet and slightly numbing. Egyptians believed it helped soothe sore gums and freshen breath. One boy offers you a piece. It's woody, oddly pleasant, and tastes faintly of medicine and molasses. Chewing it, you feel like a part of some ancient sleepover ritual. No brushes, no mouthwash, just bark and bravado. And don't forget those little copper or bronze dental tools, curved picks, scrapers, and spatula-like instruments found in temple ruins. Some may have doubled as tongue scrapers or plaque removers, used sparingly by trained healers. A few might have even resembled tweezers, for fishing out bone shards or splinters. Sounds painful? Oh, absolutely. But remember, the goal wasn't comfort. It was survival. You picture yourself in a humble mud brick home, crouched by an oil lamp, scraping ash paste across your teeth with a stick while listening to frogs croak by the Nile. It's peaceful, intimate, not clinical like modern brushing, but strangely soothing in its repetition. One quirkier theory suggests that tiny bits embedded in some chewing sticks acted like microabrasives, gently polishing the teeth as they were chewed. Whether this was on purpose or just a side effect of gnawing on gritty twigs is unclear. Either way, the result was cleaner teeth, if not exactly minty fresh. You close your eyes and try to imagine the morning routine, the rhythmic gnawing of a twig, the sharp tang of pepper paste, the warm rinse of wine or river water to finish it off. No buzzing toothbrush, no plastic waste, just wood, dust, and determination. And yet, these tools worked well enough that similar practices continued for centuries, across Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. Some are still in use today. The humble twig, it turns out, might be history's longest running dental trend. So as you wander past a low fire where a healer is drying his brush twigs for tomorrow's customers, take a moment to appreciate how something so simple, so ancient, still echoes in your bathroom cabinet. Even if your version comes with Bluetooth. You pass beneath a line of flapping linen awnings and step into a quieter part of the village, a place where people speak in softer tones, where incense curls upward like lazy snakes, and where scrolls, not spices, line the shelves. You've entered the domain of the temple healers, those rare, literate professionals who took medicine seriously enough to write it down. And yes, that includes dental pasta recipes. Here, healing isn't just about bark and prayer. It's a refined discipline, one where knowledge is sacred, guarded, and sometimes, oddly poetic. You crouch beside a low table as a priest in a leopard skin sash grinds dried hairs with practiced rhythm. The air is thick with the aroma of frankincense, cinnamon, and a hint of something chalky and burnt. He's not cooking dinner. He's compounding a toothpaste recipe passed down for generations. Carefully recorded in one of the medical papyri, long scrolls written in fine black ink, filled with neat lines of hieratic script, each one a mix of science, superstition, and survival. One such text, the Evers Papyrus, dated around 1550 BCE, lists dozens of dental remedies. Some were powders, others were pastes, and a few were poultices meant to be packed into an aching tooth socket. Imagine that, someone 3500 years ago, squinting by oil lamp, copying a formula for white powder of ox hoof and sea salt, crushed fine and warmed in honey. Historians still argue whether these recipes came from trial and error, divine inspiration, or a bit of both. The Egyptians believed deeply in balancing the body's humors, hot, cold, dry, moist, and oral health had to stay in equilibrium. If your mouth burned, it mayn't heat. If it stank, too much moisture. Each diagnosis, each remedy, tied back to a greater cosmology. You glance over the healer's shoulder as he consults a palm-sized tablet. The recipe is written in terce, rhythmic phrases, almost like a chant. There's one for firming the gums, another to drive out the worms, and a third simply labeled for the sweetening of the mouth. You get the sense that some of these formulas were handed down like family secrets, refined by temple scribes, passed along in hushed tones like culinary gold. And speaking of gold, some ingredients were shockingly expensive. Ground turquoise, imported cinnamon, saffron dissolved in honey. These weren't meant for your average farmer, they were prescriptions for the wealthy. Possibly even the pharaoh. One fringe theory even suggests certain pastes were laced with tiny amounts of electrum. The gold-silver alloy thought to channel divine energy. But not everything was glamorous. You also spot more humble recipes, once made with natron, crushed barley, mint, and stale beer. Beer, it turns out, wasn't just for getting tipsy by the Nile. Its yeasty froth had mild cleansing properties. And it helped bind powders into a usable paste. Plus, if your mouth hurt badly enough, a little buzz wasn't the worst side effect. The healer softly as a spoons a finished paste into a palm-sized alabaster jar. He presses linen over the top, seals it with wax, and places it into a wooden crate already full of similar containers. This will be distributed later, perhaps to households with a sick child. Or maybe to the embalming chamber where a noble woman awaits her afterlife dental kit. You trail him to the back of the chamber, where rows of clay pots sit cooling in shallow sand pits. One is labeled with a hieroglyph that roughly translates to, mouth cleanser no. 9. It's a thick, blackish paste, flecked with tiny bits of char. You ask what's in it. He grins. Burnt goose bone and juniper ash. He says. And crushed onyx. Good for stubborn spirits. You're not sure if he means spiritual spirits or halitosis. Possibly both. What's clear is that these healers weren't guessing blindly. They operated with a kind of ritualized precision, guided by both theology and observation. And they took pride in their work. One inscription even boasts, "He who protects the teeth of the pharaoh guards the voice of Maat," meaning truth itself. The recipes weren't static, either. Over centuries, you can trace how the ingredients shifted based on trade, climate, and even fashion, as new herbs arrived from the Levant or Nubia. Egyptian healers adapted, experimenting like ancient pharmacists. Some formulas faded, others endured. You pass by a papyrus fragment mounted in glass, with a scribbled margin noted that reads, roughly, add more resin, stung too much. It's the oldest known instance of someone leaving a bad product review. And not all temple healers were men. Some scholars argue that female scribes and caretakers played key roles in domestic medicine, especially with children's ailments and minor oral care. There are even depictions of women mixing herbal remedies in home courtiers, whispering protective spells as they stirred. A gentle breeze carries in the dry scent of crochet thyme and safflower. You feel a strange calm as you realize that even in a world of crocodiles and chaos, someone cared enough to invent a better way to clean a tooth. And they wrote it down. For you, for their children, for the gods. You step away from the temple's cool interior and into the dry glare of an Egyptian afternoon. The sun seems to sharpen every detail, the cracks in the clay pots, the dust coating the palm fronds, the shimmer of heat rising from the Nile. You follow a trail of wet footprints to the riverbank, where someone's been rinsing their mouth. It's time to talk mouthwash, ancient Egyptian style. Spoiler alert, you're not going to like what they use. The Nile, to modern eyes, is majestic, but to the ancient Egyptians, it was everything: life source, transport route, sacred entity, and yes, part-time dental rinse. Rinsing with river water was common, especially for those who couldn't afford fancier solutions. Of course, that meant you were gargling in the same water that saw everything from crocodile baths to ritual burials. So refreshing. If you were a bit better off, you had options. You could rinse with beer. Yep, actual beer, not the crisp, hoppy stuff you get at a bar, more like a cloudy porridge-like brew with a sour kick. The fermentation helped kill some bacteria, and the alcohol gave it an edge against oral infections. Plus, bossed peasants were probably less bothered by toothbrushes. But the elite, they went for something stronger: fermented wine infused with herbs like mint, coriander, or even garlic. Some recipes describe steeping these dishes for days in ceramic flasks before straining and bottling. You watch a young servant swirl a mouthful, then spit into the sand. The scent left behind is half vinegar, half salad dressing. Historians still argue whether these concoctions were rinses in the modern sense or simply ritual cleansers. Some may have doubled as perfumes or ceremonial sweeteners before Templar rites. The line between medicine and magic was blurred like a sandstorm over a scribe's parchment. You step into a shady courtyard where a woman is boiling water over a low fire. Beside her, clay jars of herbs, salt, and vinegar. She's making a gargle mixture, one for her husband, who's been complaining of a sour mouth and swollen gums. She stirs carefully, mumbling a protective phrase under her breath, and sets the pot to cool. Salt was a key ingredient in many of these rinses. Ground sea salt or natron, dissolved in water or vinegar, formed an early saline solution. Modern dentists would nod approvingly, until they saw the part where people sometimes added crushed beetles or snake skins. Just in case the problem was spirit-related. One French formula, found on a tattered medical scroll, describes rinsing with a blend of honey and goat milk, followed by a spit of bitter herbs to cast out the worms. The result? A mouth that probably smelled like an overturned market stall. But maybe, just maybe, felt a little less painful. You trail a group of boys heading toward a public well. They dip their hands, slosh water into their mouths, and rinse noisily before running off to wrestle. It's chaotic, dusty, loud, and deeply familiar. For all the differences, the act of swishing water and spitting out something unpleasant is a global, timeless habit. One man, sitting nearby, leans forward and says he prefers oil, specifically sesame. He pours a bit into his mouth, swishes slowly, then lets it dribble out onto a patch of reeds. You watch, fascinated. This might be the oldest documented example of oil pulling, a technique still popular in some natural health circles today. The theory? The oil draws out toxins and bacteria, cleaning the gums gently. Is it real science? Historians still debate. But clearly, people were willing to try anything to soothe their aching moods. Back in a wealthier part of town, you enter a perfumery turned apothecary, where elegant flasks line the shelves. A servant offers you a taste of a coppery, astringent liquid, a rinse made from pomegranate bark and alum. It's tart, metallic, and strangely effective at tightening your gums. Pomegranate was one of the few local plants with proven antibacterial power. Combined with vinegar or alum, another astringent, it formed an early version of mouth antiseptic. Cleopatra herself might have used something similar before her more famous nightly rituals. One rare papyrus even describes a ceremonial, mouth-opening, rinse used in funerary practices. Priests would pour a special solution into the deceased's mouth while chanting. Believing it allowed the spirit to speak freely in the afterlife. Talk about powerful mouthwash. You moved through the perfumed mist of burning myrrh, watching as a young girl wipes the inside of her mouth with a linen cloth soaked in rosewater and natron. A gentle touch, a pleasant scent, maybe not perfect by modern standards, but more than enough to bring relief after a day of chewing sand-filled bread. The takeaway? Ancient Egyptians didn't just invent toothpaste, they created a whole oral care system, complete with rinses, swisses, and sacred gargles. Whether out of devotion, desperation, or divine inspiration, they put effort into maintaining a mouth that could speak clearly, chew effectively, and, ideally, impress the gods. And now, as the sun sets in coppery streaks over the Nile, and the wind carries the last scent of mint, vinegar, and river water, you take a sip from a clay cup filled with herbal rinse. It's warm, it's weird, but it's oddly refreshing. You drift away from the riverside as dusk settles over the village. The Nile is a ribbon of molten bronze, reflecting the last sunlight as you follow a narrow path between stately villas and palm gardens. Here, in the heart of the elite quarters, oral care takes on an entirely different form, less survival, more style. Welcome to the world of gold teeth and false smiles. Your sandals crunch on polished stone as you step inside a nobleman's home. The air smells of lotus oil and warm linen. A servant passes, carrying a small, lacquered box bound with leather cord. Inside, an array of dental tools, glinting faintly in the lamplight. Some are tweezers, some are scooping implements, and some, more surprisingly, are meant for decoration. Because for the wealthy Egyptians, having teeth wasn't enough. You had to have impressive teeth. And if yours were damaged, you found ways to fix, or fake, them. Archaeologists have uncovered dental prosthetics in a few rare mummies, small gold wires used to bind loose teeth, or carved ivory plugs inserted where molars once sat. One notable example shows two human teeth, drilled and tied together with gold wire, perhaps to stabilize them. Or maybe just to keep up appearances in public. Historians still argue whether these devices were used in life or added after death for ceremonial reasons. You lean in to examine a tiny inlay found at the base of a noblewoman's tomb. It's a decorative insert, a sliver of turquoise shaped to fit into a front tooth. Was it functional? Not really. Was it stylish? Absolutely. Dental bling is older than you think. One fringe theory suggests these enhancements might have served symbolic purpose too, perhaps to reflect status, ward off spirits, or mimic the radiant smiles of gods. After all, many deities were depicted with perfect teeth, sometimes even radiating light. A flashy grin, it seems, was divine approved. You pass through a room filled with polished bronze mirrors and perfume jars. A young woman sits on a cushioned stool, dabbing her gums with clove oil. The scent is sharp, medicinal, and unmistakably modern. Even today, clove is used in dentistry for its numbing and antibacterial properties. But here, it's not just medicine, it's part of a beauty ritual. Elite Egyptians weren't just trying to stop pain. They were aiming for fresh breath, rosy gums, and a full, symmetrical smile. Chewing sticks were soaked in rosewater. Rinses were laced with honey and saffron. Even tooth powders were sometimes scented with cinnamon or myrrh, not for function, but for flair. In one preserved letter, a nobleman complains of his wife's unpleasant breath, and orders imported mint to be added to her toothpastes. Whether this was romantic concern or passive aggression, we'll never know. And not all solutions were subtle. In a few rare cases, skulls show signs of drilled holes in bones, possibly for attaching replacement teeth or draining abscesses. Imagine enduring that procedure without anesthesia. Imagine wanting it badly enough to go through with it. Now that's commitment. You sit beneath a portico while a servant prepares a paste from ground malachite, mixed with resin and oil. The vivid green color was likely more cosmetic than curative. It probably stained the teeth temporarily, giving them a shine under lamplight, a hint of glamour, a flash of jade in the smile. Even in death, dental appearance mattered. Some burial masks include painted teeth, pure white, carefully shaped, shining with an almost eerie perfection. Inscriptions in tombs refer to the deceased as having a mouth that speaks no lies, or a smile that gladdens the gods. Clean, radiant teeth were part of one's eternal presentation. Historians still debate how widespread these practices were. Some argue that dental vanity was limited to a tiny sliver of society, those who could afford imported spices and foreign gold. Others suggest it was more common than we think, hidden in tombs yet to be excavated or records long lost to time. You glance at your own reflection in the still water of a basin. Modern feelings. Brasses. Whitening strips. Not so different from the powdered pearls and gold wires of the ancient world. The tools change, but the goal, always the same, to look a little better. A little cleaner. A little more divine. One inscription found in a temple scroll reads, "Let the teeth be like the moon, shining and full." And you smile, imagining some poor scribe copying it out while nursing a sore jaw. You hear laughter from a nearby courtyard. A musician is playing. A platter of pomegranate and dates passes hand to hand. And somewhere in the flickering lamplight, someone flashes a brilliant smile. Whether enhanced by nature or nurtured by a paste of burnt ox hooves and myrrh. It gleams all the same. You leave behind the soft glow of noble courtyards and walk toward the quieter edges of the village. Where the walls are mud brick. The sandals are worn thin. And there's no clove oil in sight. Here, among the everyday folk of Egypt, the quest for dental relief doesn't come with gold wires or imported resins. It's raw, it's herbal, and sometimes, it's desperate. You pass a farmer kneeling in his vegetable patch. His lips pursed tightly around something dark. He's chewing myrrh resin, a hard, bitter gum harvested from trees far to the south. Not for fun, but because his back molar has been throbbing since yesterday. The resin tastes terrible, but it numbs the pain and masks the smell of infection. Kind of like nature's version of an expired numbing gel. Nearby, a woman crouches near a stone mortar, pounding dried garlic roots and crushed fennel. She added a splash of vinegar and presses the mixture into a cloth. That, she tells you, is going on to her nephew's jaw later. The boy's been moaning in his sleep. And they think it might be a hot tooth. Whether that means infection or spirit disturbance. She's not taking chances. Historians still argue whether commoners used these remedies as part of daily hygiene or only when things got bad. Evidence suggests that basic chewing sticks and herbal rinses were affordable for most. But the more elaborate pastes and procedures? Strictly for the well-connected. Yet that didn't stop ingenuity. You step into a one-room home and notice a bundle of hairs hanging over the hearth, thyme, mint, and marshmallow root. The latter was mashed into a poultice and pressed against inflamed gums. Especially in children. A cooling, soothing touch that calmed both moods and mothers. One quirky find from a worker's tomb was a small leather pouch containing chewed seeds and a worn-down stick. Almost like a dental emergency kit. Inside was also a tiny scrap of linen soaked in something sticky, possibly honey or fig sap. Sticky, yes, but also mildly antimicrobial. Some locals even used red ochre, a mineral pigment mixed into pastes, to reduce swelling and draw out heat. Whether it worked is debatable. But it was believed to have protective power, especially when combined with incantations. And let's talk incantations. You pause to listen to a grandmother chanting softly while dabbing a mixture of milk and pounded barley onto a child's cheek. The words are rhythmic, half prayer, half lullaby. According to her, the pain is caused by a tiny invisible creature living in the tooth. The mixture is for healing. The words are to convince the creature to live. Fringe as it sounds. The idea of toothworms, tiny beings that burrowed into teeth, was once widely accepted. We'll get to that later. But right now, it explains why many treatments included both hairs and words. The physical and the spiritual went hand in hand. You take a seat on a reed mat and watch a man stir a pot of stale beer and crushed coriander seeds. A rinse meant to cool the mouth and ease anger. Whether that anger refers to inflamed gums or just bad moods is anyone's guess. Another man sharpens a thin copper pick, meant for scraping food from between teeth. A winces as it tests the edge. No anesthetic, no precision, just willpower and a pinch of salt rubbed on the gum afterward to kill any lingering demons or bacteria. One of the more unsettling scenes unfolds nearby. A local healer is preparing a heated stone compress, which he plans to press against a man's swollen jaw. The idea is to draw out pus from a deep abscess. The man bites on a cloth. There's no scream, but his face says enough. And yet, moments later, he leans back, exhaling, as if even searing pain is better than the pressure he felt before. You sip from a clay cup filled with a herbal infusion of chamomile and honey. Passed to you by a kindly woman. This, she says. Is what she uses for sore throats and itchy gums. It's sweet, floral, and comforting. You nod, grateful. Some things don't change. The peasants' approach to oral health was less polished, but no less passionate. They couldn't read temple scrolls or afford saffron paste, but they knew their plants, trusted their instincts, and worked with what they had. There's a certain poetry in that. A resilience. And in some cases, their methods were surprisingly effective. Modern studies have confirmed antibacterial properties of garlic, myrrh, and thyme, and the numbing effects of licorice root and wine vinegar. The peasants weren't guessing. They were observing. They were surviving. As twilight fades and torches begin to glow along the village paths, you lie back on a woven mat. Around you, the sounds of chewing, spitting, and muttered spells fill the air. The dental clinic of ancient Egypt was never quiet, but always alive. And tomorrow? Till wake up, chew their sticks, rinse with beer, and get on with it. Because cavities wait for no one. The sun rises slowly over the Nile, casting golden light across the fields and crumbling temple walls. As you walk along the edge of a half-buried ruin, your fingers brush against stone carvings faded by time but still sharp enough to hint at meaning. Here lies one of the greatest mysteries of ancient Egyptian medicine, a document so old and so strange that even today, scholars puzzle over it. They call it the Great Dental Papyrus. You duck under a sagging lintel and enter a small chamber filled with dust, motes and stillness. In the center, a display case holds a replica of the scroll, a tattered but eerily detailed piece of work believed to date from the 16th century BCE. It's covered in spidery script and tiny line drawings of open mouths, hairs, and tools. The papyrus, possibly part of the famous Evers or a lost sibling of the Cajon or Hearst papyri, contains over a dozen mouth-related remedies. Some are straightforward, like instructions to grind barley and mix it with honey. Others are, well, less intuitive. One formula includes donkey fat, powdered incense, and red ochre, meant to draw out the flame from the gums. Historians still argue whether this scroll was an actual clinical manual or a priestly text meant for ritual purification. Some entries are oddly poetic. Let the root of the moon herb be pressed upon the tooth of fire, so that its spirit may sleep. Sounds beautiful, no idea what it means. You sit cross-legged in front of a replica, reading aloud a section titled, To Drive the Stinger from the Molar. The mixture includes dried sycamore bark, resin of terebinth, and what might be ground coral. Apply with a linen strip. It says, 3 times daily, under moonlight. You can't help but smile. It's both medicine and performance art. One entry describes a powder of white cleansing, made with natron, pounded carob pods, and date seeds. Another speaks of rinsing the mouth 7 times with salt and Nile water while facing east. Superstition? Maybe. But facing east also happened to align with sunrise and better visibility, so who's to say it didn't have logic baked in? Modern scholars have tried to recreate some of these recipes. A brave few even tested them. While the burning sensation from pepper-based pastes can be memorable, a handful showed promising antibacterial properties. One researcher claimed that tooth oil from the papyrus had the same effect as a mild antiseptic mouthwash. Still, the papyrus isn't just about curing pain. It's filled with spells and symbolic gestures. Some treatments begin with invocations to the gods, particularly Thoth, the god of wisdom, and Sekhmet, goddess of plague and healing. Others include instructions to write certain symbols on the patient's cheek using ink made from soot and wine. Whether these were meant to focus intention, ward off evil, or just add mystique, no one agrees. You find a particularly strange entry, to cure the blackening of the tongue and stop the flood of words. That one includes blue lotus, powdered fish scales, and something called stone that mounts in fire. Was it mercury, sulfur, or something lost to time? One fringe theory suggests the papyrus was compiled by multiple hands over decades, perhaps centuries, with healers adding their own family traditions alongside standard remedies. Like a medieval cookbook passed down and slowly corrupted by grandma's secret ingredient nobody else understands. You reach a section titled, The 8 Mouth Winds. According to this, each type of tudache corresponds to a different wind, entering the body through the tongue or nostrils. Remedies range from garlic compresses to chanting a list of names backwards while rinsing with goose fat. You're not sure how much of that you want to try. And yet, there's something undeniably methodical about it all. You picture a young scribe hunched over this scroll. Ink-stained hands steady, copying each remedy with reverence. Not just to preserve the formula, but to honor the ancestors who suffered through watching moods and figured something out. The papyrus also offers rare glimpses into treatment outcomes. One line notes that a certain paste eased the pain of the soldier's jaw. But his sleep did not return. Another says a rinse made the woman's mouth clean, though she could no longer speak sweetly. Clinical notes or poetic reflections? No one knows. You imagine how these remedies were received in villages, maybe whispered from healer to mother. Maybe passed between traders along the Nile. The papyrus wasn't just a book. It was a living archive of trial, error, hope, and desperation. Even in modern times, its fragments have inspired new dental research. A few alternative health advocates claim to follow Egyptian herbal protocols, though most blend modern science with ancient flair. One toothpaste company even released a formula inspired by these texts, minus the donkey fat. Thankfully, as you roll the scroll back up and slide it into its protective case, a final entry catches your eye. When the mouth is made clean, the heart may speak clearly. That's not just dental advice. That's philosophy. And maybe, just maybe, they were onto something. You step out of the dusty chamber holding the scroll replica. Your thoughts lingering on that last line, when the mouth is made clean, the heart may speak clearly. It echoes in your mind as you follow a winding path past limestone shrines and temple courtiers. The air smells faintly of soot and warm milk. But there's something else in the breeze tonight, smoke. Thick and perfumed, curling from a ritual fire where a small crowd has gathered. A man sits in the center. His jaw bound with linen, face glistening with sweat. The healer beside him isn't holding herbs or pastes. He's waving a ball of smoldering resin, muttering something low and rhythmic. You've arrived at the toothworm exorcism. Yes, really. Ancient Egyptians, and many other civilizations, once believed that toothaches were caused by worms. Tiny, malicious creatures that burrowed into the tooth, wiggled around, and caused pain. The idea wasn't just folklore, it was medical doctrine for centuries. Babylonian tablets describe them. Medieval doctors swore by them. But in Egypt, they had their own twist. The worm was sometimes described as a spirit of rot, a being of darkness that fed on sweetness and damp. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians pictured literal worms or used the term metaphorically. But the result was the same. If your tooth hurt, you had an invader, and it needed to be smoked out, scared off, or soothed into silence. You kneel near the ritual, trying not to breathe too deeply. The smoke is sharp, probably frankincense and myrrh, and the healer is chanting a verse from a medical hymn that translates loosely to "Come out, eater of teeth, flee, serpent of the gum." The man in pain groans, whether from the tooth or the sheer spiciness of the smoke. The healer dips a reed into oil and traces a spiral on the patient's cheek. Then presses a warm cloth over it, whispering instructions to sleep without speaking, lest the worm returns. It's dramatic, it's intense, and it's oddly moving. Toothworms weren't just an explanation, they were something to blame. When your face swelled and your jaw throbbed, you weren't just unlucky, you were under siege. That small psychological shift, externalizing the pain, offered comfort. It meant the suffering wasn't weakness. It was a battle. One fringe theory posits that the Egyptians might have seen actual maggots in severely infected teeth or abscesses and assumed they were the cause. Another theory? The wriggling pain of exposed nerves just felt like a creature tunneling through. You can't blame them. If you've ever had a deep cavity, you know exactly what they meant. The remedies weren't limited to smoke. One scroll describes stuffing the tooth cavity with ground carob and warm honey, while burning incense nearby to coax the worm out. Another recipe combines bulbil, crushed barley, and resin, applied with a twig to seal the hole from the worm's breath. Whether it helped is debatable. You step into a nearby home, where a grandmother is preparing a poultice for her daughter's itching mouth. She smashes dates, fig leaves, and garlic, mixes them with goat milk, and warms the blend gently before packing it onto the jaw. While she does this, she hums, low and repetitive, another version of the anti-worm charm. It's tempting to scoff, but modern medicine has its own mysteries. And the line between science and ritual isn't always as wide as we think. After all, is rubbing numbing gel on your gums while whispering, "Please stop. Please stop," really so different? Some exorcism rituals were gentler. A temple scribe might write the worm's name on papyrus, burn it, and have the patient inhale the smoke through a reed. Others were more aggressive. One description tells of a healer who used a heated metal rod to touch the tooth and burn the worm. That one's not for the squeamish, or the living. The belief in toothworms endured for centuries, even spreading into early European medicine. Ancient Roman and Greek texts mention similar ideas, often citing Egyptian precedents. You can almost imagine a Roman noble cursing his sweet tooth and booking an urgent appointment with the local worm singer. But not every healer agreed. Some early Egyptian scribes, especially those trained in temple medicine, began to challenge the idea, writing instead about imbalances in moisture or rumors as causes of decay. There is no worm. One marginal note reads, the pain is in the blood. That line, scholars believe, marks one of the earliest shifts toward more natural explanations. Still, even as scientific understanding crept forward, the rituals remained popular. Why? Because they worked. Not always medically, but emotionally. The act of numbing the pain, performing the rite, sharing the burden, it soothed more than the tooth. You return to the fire circle, where the ritual has ended. The man sits quietly now, jaw still swollen but eyes calmer. Accepts a twig soaked in mirror oil and begins to chew. Slowly, methodically, the healer hands him a satchel of hairs to keep under his pillow. 4 dreams without worms. Essays. You lie back in the sand, listening to the last embers crackle. Above you, stars appear, sharp, ancient, unblinking, and you can't help but wonder how many moods across millennia have whispered to the sky, praying for relief from a pain that felt alive. Tudaches, worms, spells, smoke. Even now, the ache lingers. But the fear? It's a little easier to bear. Once you give it a name. Morning again. You rise with the distant calls of ibis birds echoing across the papyrus marshes. Their cries softening as the sun paints gold across mud brick walls. The village is slowly waking, roosters crow. Pots clink, sandals scoof over worn stone. Both tucked inside many homes. Long before breakfast is served or crops are tended. The day begins with something more personal, the oral care ritual. This isn't your brisk 2-minute electric brush while scrolling your phone. No, this is slower, quieter. You watch as a mother stirs from her reed mat and moves to the window. Unwrapping a bundle of chopsticks soaked overnight in rose water. She selects one, fries the tip with her teeth, and begins rubbing it gently across her molars. Her face remains calm, focused. These chopsticks, the same sticks you saw in earlier sections, aren't just for cleaning. They're spiritual, social, and sensory tools. The act of chewing them is soothing, meditative, and, as always, impressively effective. The fibrouscent scrub plaque. The natural compounds freshen breath, and the mechanical motion massages the gums. Her son, still blinking sleep from his eyes, starts his own morning ritual with something different, oil pulling. It takes a swig from a clay flask filled with sesame oil. Then swishes it around, cheeks puffing, lips pursing in rhythm. It's not glamorous, but it works. Oil, they believed, pulled toxins from the mouth and left the breath clean and light. Historians still debate whether oil pulling began in Egypt or was later imported via trade from the East. But there are references to mouth oils being used by temple healers and wealthy households alike. Some oils were infused with herbs, coriander, cinnamon, cardamom, for extra zing. Others were kept plain, thick, and golden. You walk through a cluster of homes and observe variations of the routine everywhere. One woman uses a linen cloth dipped in vinegar and thyme, whipping it along her gum line. Another boils date seeds and lets the steam wash over her face and mouth. Inhaling the herbal vapor through her nose and exhaling through pursed lips. It's a full body floss. In a way, there's a kind of rhythm to it all, swish, scrub, rinse. It's not frantic. No one's rushing. The brushing isn't aggressive. The oils aren't gag-inducing. It's about presence, about intention. This isn't just about health, it's about balance. You step into a scribe's home and find a more elaborate version of the routine. A choose licorice root, dips a carved bone pick into a tin of ground natron, and uses it to trace along his teeth. Follows that with a rinse of pomegranate vinegar, then finishes with a dab of frankincense oil on his tongue. The whole process takes 15 minutes. Does it every day. Why? To honor the voice. Tells you, the mouth is the door of truth. Keep the door clean. That phrase sticks with you. Some fringe theories suggest that oral cleanliness wasn't just a matter of avoiding pain or bad breath, it was seen as a moral responsibility. A clean mouth meant clear speech. Clear speech meant honesty. Honesty, of course, pleased the gods. And that might be why so many prayers and rituals in ancient Egypt involved the mouth. The opening of the mouth ceremony for the dead, for instance, wasn't just symbolic, it was vital. By ritually touching the mouth with special tools, priests restored the deceased's ability to speak, eat, and breathe in the afterlife. A clean mouth wasn't just hygienic, it was sacred. As the sun climbs higher, you find yourself watching a group of teenage boys lounging near the river. Each one nagging lazily on a chewing stick. One of them takes a bit of natron, dabs it onto his stick, and continues. They joke, spit into the reeds, rinse with river water, and laugh again. It's not a chore, it's a social routine, maybe even a bonding moment. Oral care. But make it cool. You ask if they do this every day. They shrug. Twice. Usually. Morning and night. Otherwise. The worms come. Ah yes. The worms again. Even in daily routines, remnants of old beliefs remain. Some still chew facing east, toward the rising sun. Others say a prayer when spitting, thanking the gods for the purging of evil. These customs aren't questioned. They're inherited. They're part of life. And it wasn't just about the mouth. Some routines extended to tongue scraping, gargling with herbal steam, and even nose rinsing, since they believed illness often entered through multiple facial doors. One passage from a temple text reads, "Cleanse the openings, and the breath will carry peace." You lie down near a palm grove, closing your eyes as a gentle breeze passes over you, scented faintly with mint, oil, and dust. You think about your own morning routine, brisk, mechanical, silent. Here, it's something else entirely. It's a ritual, a ceremony, a small act of devotion to the self and the divine. As the village buzzes with new activity, oxen lowing, grain being ground, pots clattering, you realize something quietly profound. For the ancient Egyptians, oral care wasn't an obligation. It was a lifestyle, a rhythm, a sacred beginning to every day. And maybe, just maybe, it's worth slowing down tomorrow morning. Not for your dentist, but for yourself. The sun now hangs high overhead, its heat pressing down like a stone slab. You seek shade beneath a drooping fig tree on the edge of the desert, where the greenery thins and the land begins to harden. Here, time feels slower, heavier, and so does the mood. You're not in the golden age anymore. The villages look a little poorer. The walls are more cracked. The songs, less frequent. Something's changing. And it's not just the dynasty. This is the long slide into decline, the slow erosion of the systems that once made ancient Egypt sparkle. And like everything else in a crumbling civilization, dental health goes downhill, too. You stroll past a field where wheat lies rotting, unharvested. Drought has hit hard this year. The Nile's flood cycle, once predictable, once sacred, is out of rhythm. Less water means smaller crops. And smaller crops mean more desperation. Less grinding, less care in preparing grain. The result? Even grittier bread, even worse teeth. Historians still argue whether Egypt's dental decline was primarily environmental, driven by climate changes, or whether it stemmed from political instability. With fewer state resources going into public health, food refinement, or education. Maybe both. Maybe everything. But the evidence is clear in the bones. You pass a low burial site recently uncovered by archaeologists. The skeletons here tell a very different story from the polished skulls of the Old Kingdom. Severe tooth wear, multiple abscesses, heavy bone swelling. One young woman's teeth are so ground down. There's almost nothing left but stubs. And she died at 22. In earlier periods, dental problems were widespread but not catastrophic. Now, they're epidemic. The scrolls that once recorded detailed recipes are fewer. Scribes, who maintained and passed down oral health knowledge, have dwindled. Some temple libraries have burnt. Others were looted. You feel the loss like a missing tooth in the jaw of history. The rituals remain, but they're fragmented. One village uses natron and clove oil, another swears by vinegar and garlic. There's no consensus, no central healer class. It's a kind of oral health free for all, with every family clinging to whatever recipe grandma whispered on her deathbed. You spot a healer in a tattered linen robe grinding something in a broken pot. He's using crushed brick, mixed with sour beer, to create a kind of desperate paste. It smells foul. Shrugs. It burns. So it must work. E says. You nod politely. E offers you a taste. You decline enthusiastically. In wealthier cities, Greek and Persian influences begin to creep in. Foreign physicians bring their own remedies, some of which are improvements. And some of which are just different. You find references to vinegar decoctions, alum gargles, and soft wool tongue brushes. There's innovation, but also confusion. What's tradition? What's new? What's even working anymore? One quirk, an increase in superstitious oral charms. With the decline of organized temple medicine, people turn to amulets, spell prayers, and tooth gods. Tiny statuettes of Bes, protector of households, become more common. Especially in bedrooms and kitchens. Some amulets are shaped like teeth themselves. Made from ivory or lapis lazuli. Believed to draw out decay. You enter a home where a child cries through the night. Clutching his jaw. His mother, with no access to a healer, wraps a garlic bulb in a strip of linen and presses it to his cheek. She mutters a charm taught by her grandmother. It's part treatment, part lullaby. You don't know if it'll help. But it comforts. And that's the thing, despite the decline. The rituals endure. Modified, yes. Diminished, yes. But not gone. You cross into a once grand necropolis now half buried by sand. A crumbling wall reveals a mural of a god with outstretched hands. His mouth gleams, painted white. With perfect rows of teeth. Below, a scribe has scrawled a barely legible line in hieratic. May he be judged by the clearness of my words and my breath. That sentiment hasn't changed, even in a time of famine, war, and fading power. Oral purity remains a metaphor for spiritual clarity. The physical and the symbolic stay intertwined, right to the bitter end. One fringe theory suggests that in later periods, certain underground sects preserved the old oral care rituals in secret. Hidden scrolls, passed from one healer to another. Techniques whispered behind closed doors. Whether that's true or not, it's a romantic image of wisdom resisting decay. Like a pearl hidden in a crumbling molar. Eventually, Roman influence tightens its grip. Latin inscriptions begin to appear in Egyptian tombs. Toothcare starts to look different, more tools. Fewer hairs. Mouthwash shifts from honeyed oils to diluted vinegar solutions. And slowly, the original Egyptian system begins to dissolve into history. But before that happens, before the names of the gods are replaced, you pause one last time beneath a fig tree. The air is still. The breeze tastes faintly of dust and fennel. And for a moment, you feel the weight of all those teeth, beating, grinding, hurting, healing. This isn't just a story about toothpaste. It's a story about how civilizations care, or forget to care, for the smallest, most personal parts of themselves. Like molars. Like memory. The dusty wind picks up as you make your way along a stone causeway flanked by columns worn smooth by time. Up ahead, a group of strangers approaches, wearing tunics not of linen, but of wool. Their sandals are thicker. Their speech, foreign, harsh consonants, broad gestures, laughter at all the wrong moments. You've just run into the Romans, tourists, invaders, and unexpected dental critics. By the time the Romans arrived in Egypt in the 1st century BCE, the great temples had already begun to crumble. The golden dynasties were past. The priesthood fragmented. But Egypt still dazzled them, its pyramids, its gods, its mysterious scrolls full of riddles and remedies. And among all these wonders, the Romans noticed something else. The Egyptians really cared about their moods. You find a scroll written by a Roman physician named Scribonius Largus, who visited Alexandria and wrote home in disbelief about the obsession with gum paste rituals and the application of dung to teeth. Yes, he said that crocodile dung made quite an impression, pun intended. Historians still argue whether this was a misunderstanding or a real practice still lingering in rural areas. But either way, the image stuck, the refined Egyptian, brushing with myrrh one day and scrubbing with reptile residue the next. And the Romans, with their more utilitarian approach, weren't sure whether to be impressed or alarmed. You follow a Roman delegation into a courtyard, where they watch an Egyptian healer work. He chews a licorice root, scrapes his tongue with a bronze strip, then rubs his teeth with a date paste and natron mix. The Romans recoil slightly. One mutters something about barbarian spa treatments. Another asks where to buy it. Classic. To be fair, Roman dental care wasn't exactly sophisticated. Their own powders included ingredients like crushed mouse brains, ground bones, and oyster shells. Not exactly minty fresh. They also used urine, imported from Portugal, to whiten teeth. Spoiler, this works, chemically, due to ammonia, but no thank you. So when they arrived in Egypt and saw herbal oil pulling, tongue scrapers, and chew sticks soaked in saffron, they were confused. Some admired the innovation, others mocked it. One Roman writer sneered that the Egyptians whispered to their gums more than to their gods. Still, influence flowed both ways. Some Egyptian elites adopted Roman dental habits, like spongy cloth pads soaked in wine and vinegar, pressed to the gums. Egyptian scrolls began incorporating Latin phrases. A few new materials appeared in local pastes: crochet coral, salt from Capri, ground marble. You strolled through a Roman bathhouse built on Egyptian soil. Inside, an apothecary stand sells powders in tiny glass vials. One is labeled Dentifricium Alexandrinum, Alexandrian tooth powder. It contains mint, rock salt, cinnamon bark, and a touch of honey. A Roman-Egyptian hybrid. The original, co-branded, product. One fringe theory suggests that these imported pastes became status symbols, more for show than for function. You'd line them up on your vanity table. Let guests see them, but never actually use them. Kind of like those fancy soaps no one's allowed to touch. But not everyone was impressed. You visit the home of a Roman trader who complains bitterly in his diary about the constant chewing of sticks and spitting of oil. He writes that Egyptians smell always of trees and vinegar. Another calls them gum whisperers and mouth mages. It's meant as an insult. But honestly, it sounds kind of cool. Yet, despite their jokes, the Romans quietly adopted many Egyptian habits. By the 2nd century CE, Roman physicians were writing more frequently about oral irrigation, fragrant rinses, and herbal gum treatments, all lifted directly from Egyptian practice. Even Galen, the famous Roman physician, references treatments that match nearly word for word with older Egyptian formulas. He recommends myrrh, pomegranate bark, salt drops, and natron, all ingredients long used along the Nile. Still, something is missing. You stand in an open-air marketplace where Roman traders sell imported vinegar mouthwashes in amphorae and discuss tooth discoloration with loud, sarcastic flair. It's efficient, it's clean, but it's not sacred, it's not personal. The spiritual thread, the belief that the mouth is a gateway not just to health but to truth, morality, and the afterlife, doesn't carry over. To the Romans, oral care is cosmetic. To the Egyptians, it was cosmic. You watch a last Egyptian priest walk slowly through the crowd, ignored by the new rulers, clutching a bundle of hairs and muttering a prayer. His scrolls are fading, his pupils are few, but his rituals haven't changed. He still starts the day with oil, still finishes it with saffron paste, still whispers to his gums, just in case. As you drift from the scene, you feel the tension, two civilizations passing the same tool back and forth, each using it differently. For one, a routine. For the other, a rite. And though the Romans may have conquered Egypt with swords and soldiers in bathrooms across the empire, Egyptian toothpaste quietly won the war. You leave behind the Roman plazas and perfumed baths and return to a different kind of stillness, the crisp, dry silence of the excavation tent. You duck inside, and instantly the world changes. It's all catalogued bone, linen-wrapped fragments, and trays of curious objects that haven't seen sunlight in thousands of years. This is the realm of modern archaeologists. And in here, the ancient Egyptian toothpaste is no longer myth or rumor, it's tangible. Crusty, chalky, puzzlingly preserved in jars, bowls, and even inside mummified mugs. On a simple wooden table sits a small alabaster container, no bigger than a fist. A fine crack runs down its side. Inside, a dusty lump of something the color of old plaster. It looks like dried clay. It smells faintly of hairs. This, they believe, was once a toothpaste, or something close to it. You watch as a researcher gently scrapes a flake into a vial, labeling it with care. These residues, found in tombs, temple ruins, and burial kits, are tiny time capsules. And their analysis is revealing some surprising truths. For one thing, the ingredients weren't random. Mass spectrometry and residue analysis have confirmed the presence of many substances mentioned in the old scrolls: natron, burnt bone ash, powdered iris, frankincense resin, salt, and, yes, myrrh. In one jar, even trace elements of mint and ground pepper. Another, from a different region, contains fine particles of pomegranate rind and dried date. And the craziest find? One tomb yielded a paste containing tiny fragments of gold leaf. Not functional, not medicinal, just aesthetic, a luxury blend, maybe used in elite embalming, or for royalty to flash their molars in the afterlife. Historians still debate whether some of these pastes were used in life, or if they were created specifically for death. Ritual-only blends might have favored scent and symbolic purity, whereas everyday formulas prioritized abrasiveness and antimicrobial effects. You step over to another display, a collection of toothbrush-like tools found buried alongside their owners. Most are twigs, frayed at the end, but a few have been chewed into soft brushes, almost like modern paintbrushes. One is wrapped in linen, suggesting it was a personal object, carried in life and honored in death. You lean over a skull under a glass dome. The teeth are worn, as expected, but the molars show regular wear patterns that suggest repeated cleaning motions, up and down, side to side, the kind of rhythm that comes from daily habit. And then there's the strange residue clinging to the molars, a mix of ash and plant fibers, possibly from a toothpaste or chewing paste that dried in place just before death. One theory? The individual had just completed their morning cleaning routine before collapsing, or was prepared carefully by someone who loved them. In the far corner of the tent, a team works on decoding yet another papyrus fragment. A barely legible formula includes a line that translates to: apply in morning light, speed toward the sun, let the breath be clean before the day begins. It's not just medical, it's poetry. Modern scientists have tried recreating some of these ancient pastes. A brave group of dental students in the 1990s actually made and tested a few recipes under supervision. The results were fascinating. Some were surprisingly effective at cleaning and polishing. A few left users with tingling gums and runny noses. One nearly started a fire when someone applied it near a candle. Note: frankincense resin más open flame igual a bad idea. In museums around the world, ancient Egyptian dental items are now getting more attention. For decades, they were ignored, tucked behind the sexier artifacts like sarcophagi, jewelry, or statues. But now, curators proudly display oral hygiene kits, bundles of chopsticks, paste jars, tongue scrapers, and even copper picks used to probe between teeth. One fringe theory being explored suggests that some of the chalky residues considered cosmetic powders may actually have been tooth powders misidentified. In other words, those little pots weren't for cheeks or eyebrows. They were for molars. And that leads to the big question. What exactly did they know? Did they understand bacteria? No. Did they know about cavities? Sort of. Did they know that cleaning your mouth every day helped you feel better, talk better, and live longer? Absolutely. You sit at a table covered in scattered notes, X-ray images of ancient jaws, and handwritten translations of scrolls. The conclusions are clear. Ancient Egyptians had the first known toothpaste, the first recorded oral health recipes, the first use of hairs, abrasives, and oil in dental care, the first brushes, and probably the first I forgot to clean my teeth this morning, regret. You leave the tent as the sun begins to fall behind the dunes. The wind has picked up again, carrying the scent of old paper, stone dust, and a little bit of ancient peppermint. You walk slowly, chewing a twig out of curiosity, and realize something simple. They weren't primitive. They were people. People with itching gums, stained teeth, and hopes for cleaner breath before facing the gods. People with recipes written in ink that still whispers through time. The path home feels lighter now. You wander through the fields under a soft pink sky. The kind that signals the day is winding down in Egypt. The laborers are retreating to their homes. The river slows, and somewhere, in a reed thatched house by the Nile, a child chews on licorice root while a grandmother folds away her linen to cloth for the night. The world quiets, and you're almost ready to leave it. But not before we finish the story. Not before we talk about what's still with us. Because even now, modern toothpaste owes a lot to ancient Egypt. You head into a modern lab. Lights humming, shelves stacked with sleek white tubes and plastic brushes. But if you squint, just a little, you can still see the past flickering underneath. Take a look at your toothpaste label, sodium bicarbonate. That's just refined natron. Essential oils, myrrh and peppermint. Fluoride. A modern substitute for what the Egyptians tried to mimic using ground oyster shell or bone ash. Historians still argue over who invented toothpaste. The Chinese had their own herbal versions. The Greeks liked their crochet oyster shell and vinegar blend. But no civilization, not one, wrote it down first, refined it early, and ritualized it daily like the Egyptians did. They made it sacred. They made it a routine. They made it work. Even the idea of brushing twice a day as echoes in ancient scrolls, morning to greet the gods, evening to cleanse the day's burdens. You pass by a digital display at a museum that lists surviving Egyptian dental ingredients still used today. Clove oil, licorice, mint, salt, myrrh, baking soda. You smile. Your toothpaste is just hieroglyphs with branding. One particularly poetic papyrus ends with the line, "Let the teeth be clean, that the voice may be heard." That simple phrase captures it all. Oral hygiene wasn't cosmetic. It was identity, communication, dignity. Whether speaking before a court, whispering a prayer, or simply greeting a friend, your mouth mattered. One fringe theory from Egyptologists proposes that the earliest priestly classes may have carried portable toothkits like priests today carry incense and bells. Instead of blessing a room, they purified it with scent and sound and the clean breath of ritual. Nothing proven, but you can imagine it, can't you? And maybe most impressive of all is this. Thousands of years later, we're still doing it. Still brushing, still rinsing, still chewing. Sure, the tools are fancier, the commercials are louder, but at the heart of it, we're still human moods trying to stay clean in a very dusty world. You lie back under a tree as the last sunlight fades. And you picture a young boy from 4,000 years ago dipping a stick into powdered natron and rubbing it across his teeth with care. Not to look rich, not even to feel fresh, but because it was the right thing to do. The wise thing. The normal, everyday, beautifully human thing. You'd recognize him, he'd recognize you. Both of you holding onto the same quiet ritual. One that echoes across pyramids, tombs, tiled bathrooms, and time itself. And as you breathe deep and the night falls around you like linen, you remember that even the smallest routine, spitting toothpaste into a basin, chewing a stick in silence, rinsing with oil, connects you to the long, dusty thread of history. A thread made not of gold, but of mint, and salt, and myrrh. Word count, 1094. Wind down begins below. And now, let's ease out of the desert. Out of the incense and scrolls. Out of the cracked jars and silvered skulls. You're lying still now. Let your body soften. Your shoulders sink just a little deeper. The air is calm. The wind has quieted. The Nile is far away. But it still flows, steady and silver in the moonlight, curling past pyramids and cities long turned to sand. Somewhere, a woman finishes her evening rinse with rosewater. A priest extinguishes the last temple torch. A child lies down their chopstick and sighs. Mouth fresh and breath clean. The world is softer now. Slower. Wrapped in linen and time. There are no deadlines here. No screens. Just the gentle rhythm of a brush. The whisper of a chant. And the flicker of an oil lamp in the quiet dark. Your heartbeat slows. Your thoughts drift like boats on the river. The scroll is rolled up. The tools put away. The breath. Calm. Sleep now. The sand gives way beneath your feet as you wander out of Egypt, not just physically, but across borders of culture and time. You pass beneath a painted archway, across a shifting landscape, and soon find yourself not in the Nile Delta, but in another cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia. Here, too, people chewed sticks, different trees, of course, tamarisk, willow, even fig, but the ritual was the same. Bite the end, fry the fibers, scrub gently. The idea of using natural twigs as oral tools wasn't exclusive to the Egyptians. It was everywhere, and it still is. You're now tracing what historians call convergent innovation, when multiple cultures, without contact, stumble upon similar solutions to common problems. In this case, cavities. In the Indus Valley, near present-day Pakistan and northwest India, archaeologists uncovered evidence of tooth drilling from as far back as 7000 BCE. Not for decoration, not for fun, for health. Ancient skulls show signs of early dental intervention, tiny holes bored into infected teeth, likely to relieve pressure or remove decay. With what? Probably flint tools. And no anesthesia. You cringe at the thought. But oral hygiene wasn't always reactive. In the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, researchers found rounded sticks with grooves, possibly used as rudimentary scrapers or brushes. No scrolls to explain their use. No recipes. Just word patterns and logic. Clean teeth matter. No matter your language or gods. You step across another threshold. Bamboo leaves rustle. Welcome to ancient China. Here, in the courts of the Shang and Zhou dynasties, early medical texts describe powdered mixtures made of salt, ginseng, dried ginger, and crushed bones, applied with cloth or chewed into paste. One herbalist writes of a cooling rinse for speaking with clarity. Made from boiled lotus root and mint, eerily close to the myrrh-based rinses you saw in Egypt. Historians still argue which civilization invented toothpaste first. Was it Egypt's natron mix? China's salt blends? Mesopotamia's ash powder? It depends on your definition. But the deeper truth? Everyone was chewing. And then there's sub-Saharan Africa, where the practice of using chewing sticks is still alive today, especially the Salvadora persica, also known as the toothbrush tree. Its twigs contain natural antiseptics, fluoride, and plaque-reducing compounds. Muslim traditions even promoted its use in religious practice, especially before prayer, making it a spiritual as well as hygienic act. Sound familiar? In fact, chew sticks appear on every continent except Antarctica. Native Australians used eucalyptus stems. Indigenous peoples of the Americas used sweetgrass or dogwood. Polynesians chewed coconut fibers. The tools varied, but the action, the intention, nearly identical. You sit beneath a banyan tree, marveling at the fact that oral hygiene is one of the few human rituals that evolved independently. Globally, not imposed, not exported, simply, invented over and over again. A biological necessity, solved with twigs, leaves, ash, and care. And with each of these cultures, the cleaning of the mouth wasn't just mechanical. It was symbolic. In Japan, samurai brushed before battle. In early Islamic texts, oral hygiene is part of purification before prayer. In Hindu tradition, the mouth is a sacred passage. What you eat, what you say, what you breathe all define your karma. Which makes you wonder, why did we ever stop treating the mouth as sacred? You chew a twig slowly, listening to the crunch of fibers. The air smells of distant spices. You're surrounded by the ghosts of other people's toothbrushes. And yet, here you are, doing the exact same thing. One fringe theory suggests that chewing sticks weren't just about cleaning, they were early stress relief tools. Used during long walks, ceremonies, or storytelling, chewing activates nerves in the jaw that release calming signals to the brain. So even before the toothbrush became clinical, it was already comforting. It's funny, really. For all our tech, our wireless devices, our fluoride-enhanced health, we're still just people with moods. Moods that get dry, dirty, sour, anxious, and we still crave the same fix. Clean, calm, clear. As the sun dips low and the light filters through hanging leaves, you lean back against a tree trunk. Around the world, others do the same, brushing with bark, swishing with herbal rinse, spitting softly into the earth. And even though they've never met, never traded scrolls, never shared gods, they've all invented the same habit. One chew stick, one mouth, one little moment of peace. Night falls gently across the world now. You lie beneath a sky too vast to belong to one country. And the stars above you seem older than pyramids, older than scrolls, older even than Tudaches. And as you breathe in the quiet of this global dark, you begin to notice something deeper, something that transcends technique, ingredients, or chew stick species. It's the idea that the mouth itself is sacred. In ancient Egypt, you saw this in every scroll and ceremony. But that reverence isn't uniquely Egyptian. Across cultures and continents, mouths weren't just instruments of speech or tools for eating, they were portals. They connected body to spirit, thought to sound, self to others. So let's wander, gently, slowly, into some of these myths and meanings. In Aztec ritual, the god Quetzalcoatl was said to have breathed life into clay figures, animating them with sacred breath through the mouth. Speaking was divine, breathing was spiritual, and so, the purification of the mouth before prayers or offerings became a norm, rinses of salt water, chewing of sweet bark, even fasting to quiet the mouth. In Hindu traditions, the mouth is the gate of truth. What passes through it, food, mantras, lies, affects karma. Many people rinse before prayers, chew leaves like tulsi or neem, or scrape their tongues at dawn. These aren't quirks, they're acts of alignment. To speak the sacred, the mouth must be clean. In Buddhism, too, silence and the control of the mouth are part of spiritual training. Monks often fast before long meditations and may rinse or chew hairs not to freshen breath, but to still the body's cravings. A quiet mouth reflects a quiet mind. You walk now through a dense forest in West Africa, where oral traditions thrive, not in scrolls but in songs. Griots, or traveling storytellers, hold the histories of entire villages in memory. Their voices are instruments, and before they speak, some chew bitter coal and nut or scented bark, believed to sharpen the tongue and clear the spirit's path. Historians still argue whether these rituals count as hygiene or ceremony. But why separate them? To these cultures, they were one and the same. You clean the mouth not just to protect your teeth, but to honor the words you speak. And the silence you keep. In medieval Judaism, the Talmud prescribes oral washing upon waking, not just for physical cleanliness, but to remove impurities gathered during sleep. Early morning prayers are best spoken with clean breath and clear tongue. A ritual rinse becomes a declaration, I am ready to speak with my Creator. Meanwhile, in Islamic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad recommended the use of the miswak, a type of chewstick, for every prayer. For every Friday bath, before reading the Quran, before entering the house, before going to bed, the miswak wasn't just a tool. It was an act of devotion. You sit beneath a banyan tree and listen to the wind whisper through the branches. It sounds like breath, like words half formed, like something waiting to be spoken. And this reminds you of something older still, the opening of the mouth ceremony in Egypt. It was not about the dead alone. It was about speech, about freedom, about the belief that a clean mouth allows the soul to speak its truth. Imagine that. Imagine carrying that belief into your daily routine. One fringe theory among cultural anthropologists suggests that early spiritual systems may have evolved from the act of preparing the body to speak. That before we prayed, we rinsed. Before we begged the gods, we brushed. Before we confessed or chanted or pleaded, we chewed a twig, spat out the bitterness, and whispered our truth. You don't need to believe it to feel the weight of it. You run your tongue over your own teeth now. Slowly, thoughtfully. They are not just tools for chewing. They are your boundary and your bridge. They guard your breath. They shape your voice. They carry your promises. And when they ache, you fall silent. No wonder every culture feared toothworms. Prayed for gum strength. Invented paste after paste to quiet the pain. It wasn't vanity. It was survival, not just of the body, but of the spirit's ability to speak. And so, as the stars turn overhead and the darkness deepens, you breathe through your nose. Let your jaw relax, and feel gratitude for your own quiet mouth. Still, clean, sacred, not because it is perfect, but because it speaks for you. The earth is softer here. The wind warm with distant memory. You walk slowly now, your pace more thoughtful, as though every step sinks a little deeper into time. You're no longer wandering just among ruins or rituals. You're walking through the quiet, universal H that ties all humanity together. Tooth decay. Yep. Cavities. Caries. Crumbling molars. The great equalizer. From pharaoh to farmer, priest to peasant, everyone, has felt the dull, throbbing agony of a tooth gone bad. And across the globe, that pain has shaped more than just morning routines. It's shaped medicine, architecture, even diets. Let's start at the beginning. You crouch beside a Stone Age skull. Its jaw frozen in a grimace. The molars are massive, designed for raw roots and tough muscle. But look closely, no cavities. Not a single black pit. That's because early humans, for all their hardships, didn't eat much sugar or starch. Their teeth wore down from grit and grain. Yes, but rot? That came later. It started with farming. Historians still argue whether the agricultural revolution was a blessing or a mistake. But one thing is clear, once we started planting wheat and storing grain, we began grinding it, literally and biologically. Bread became life, and bread became the problem. You remember Egypt's sand-filled floor. But it wasn't just there. In Neolithic Europe, women's skeletons show flat molars, likely from grinding grain between sandstone cairns. In Mesoamerica, obsidian blades and metates left behind the same signature, smooth, worn teeth and deep cavities. You travel now through Mongolia, the Pacific Islands, and the Andes. Everywhere you find the same trade-off, more calories, more security, more food, but worse teeth, always worse teeth. One fringe theory even suggests that ancient migration patterns were influenced by oral health. Communities plagued by food rot and tooth decay may have moved more frequently, chasing softer plants or cleaner water sources to save their smiles. No firm proof, But doesn't it make sense? If your jaw hurts every time you eat, wouldn't you move mountains for relief? You pass through a medieval monastery, where monks are boiling hairs for a dental rinse made of thyme, vinegar, and blessed salt. One scribbles a note in the margin of a medical text: Brother Elias cannot speak for pain in the mouth. You pause. That's not just history, that's heartbreak. Because when your teeth rot, you don't just lose food. You lose voice. You lose connection. You curl inward, silent, while the world moves on. Even great kings suffered. The skull of King Richard III, yes, the one from the parking lot, shows signs of terrible dental disease. Cavities, abscesses, likely chronic pain. Queen Elizabeth I, her famous pale face was framed by rotting black teeth. Sugar was her downfall. She loved it, and it ruined her. There's something humbling in that. That the most powerful people in the world were brought low not by war, but by molars. That pharaohs could build pyramids but not stop plaque. That all the scrolls, the spells, the silver tools still lost to the bacteria we now destroy with a $3 toothbrush. You kneel beside a modern X-ray display. One side shows a peasant from 1300 CE, missing half his teeth by age 30. The other shows a Victorian aristocrat with abscesses so deep they eroded into the sinus cavity. Who had better healthcare? It's a toss-up. Tooth decay, it turns out, is not a moral failure. It's not punishment for poor hygiene or too many sweets. It's a sign of humanity adapting faster than biology can keep up. Our jaws evolved for raw tubers and bone marrow. Then we invented pie. Guess who wins that fight? You walk into a village clinic in the modern day, any country. Really, and you'll see the same thing. A long line of people. Swollen cheeks, whispered pain, and always someone trying to help. Maybe it's a dentist. Maybe it's a grandmother with a clove oil rag. Maybe it's just someone to hold your hand while you wait. And this is why dental history matters. Not because we need to memorize who first mixed natron and myrrh, but because it reminds us that everyone suffers. Everyone tries. Everyone passes something down. You picture a Neanderthal using a stick to poke at a sore tooth. A Viking heating salt water for a rinse. A Maasai tribes woman teaching her daughter how to cut shoe sticks from the right tree. Pain unites us. But so does care. So does relief. And when you think about it that way, the humble toothbrush isn't just a hygiene tool. It's a love letter from the past. A promise: we figured this much out. Here, try this. As the night deepens and the air turns cool, you sit back and close your eyes. You feel your own teeth beneath your lips. Tears still there. Still chewing. Still speaking. Still aching sometimes. But still, carrying you forward. The stars overhead seem quieter now, less like burning giants. More like candle flames in the rafters of time. You walk through a dreamlike alley, where the stones shift from sandstone to cobblestone, to dust, to tile, to packed dirt, depending on the step. You're walking not in a place, but through a thread, the thread of memory passed not through scrolls, but through hands. This is the story of the forgotten healers. Because while ancient Egypt gave us beautiful papyri filled with incantations and recipes, and temples staffed with scribes and priests, most dental care didn't happen in temples. It happened in kitchens, in courtyards, in fields, between one harvest and the next. And it was handled, more often than not, by women. You sit beside a cooking fire in a small Nubian home, where a mother dabs crushed thyme and honey onto her daughter's swollen gums. The girl cries quietly, and the mother ums, not as a spell, not as a ritual, but as comfort. The recipe? Not written. It was passed from her own mother, who got it from her grandmother. A line of knowledge longer than any scroll. Historians still argue how much medical power village women held. The official records ignore them. The temples didn't name them. But the archaeological evidence whispers, here. In this hut, was someone mixing powdered frankincense into goat milk to soothe a child's teeth in fever. Here, someone boiled roots to rinse the mouth of a husband too proud to admit the pain. You walk now into medieval Europe, where midwives and herbalists doubled as dental helpers. No license, no tools, just clove oil, fingertips, and prayers. The Catholic Church later demonized many of them, called them witches, but for centuries they were the only ones who could pull a rotten tooth without causing a funeral. One fringe theory suggests that in some Egyptian villages, tooth mothers were known, matriarchs who specialized in oral care. storing sticks and oils in bundles they carried to birth, weddings, even funerals. No record of their names. But you can still see the wear patterns on the tools found in simple tombs, hands that worked, not wrote. In ancient China, female herbalists combined mouth rinses with breath control training, treating dental pain as a symptom of inner imbalance. They taught quiet routiness: chew the bark, breathe through the nose, hold the rinse, spit on a blessed leaf. It was less about science, more about wisdom honed in silence. And in indigenous communities across the Americas, elders taught children to chew sweetgrass and pine resin, not because of textbooks, but because the trees had taught them. The forest gave them medicine. The women gave it meaning. You pass through a tent in the Mongolian steppe, where an old woman chews on dry horsehair dipped in salt and uses it to scrub her teeth. Her granddaughter mimics her movements, awkwardly, adorably. There is no instruction, just imitation, just tradition. And that's the beauty of it. Most of the world's dental wisdom wasn't preserved in ink. It was preserved in muscle memory, in habits, in hands, in quiet, careful care repeated day after day, night after night, for generation after generation. You step into a colonial village now, where European physicians have set up clinics. They bring metal tools, printed pamphlets, stern advice. But across the road, an older woman stirs a pot of mint, ginger, and vinegar, humming as she bottles it in clay jars. People still visit her, because she listens, because she doesn't just treat pain, she understands it. And isn't that what real care is? One of the more recent discoveries from rural Egypt came not from a temple, but a family home in Upper Egypt, where a bundle of 19th century oral care tools was found, wrapped in a linen sash with tiny inscriptions: for child, for widow, for the traveler, chew sticks, powders, a copper scraper, a folded note with a list of hairs. No names attached. And yet, it radiates the same quiet warmth. Here. I kept this for you. I want your mouth to stop hurting. You think of your own first lessons in oral hygiene. Was it a mother standing in the doorway? A grandmother brushing your hair and reminding you to rinse? The hand on your back while you leaned over the sink, spitting and laughing and complaining? That, too, is history. That, too, is medicine. You lie back now on a woven mat near a flickering fire. The shadows dance gently across your arms. You close your eyes. Somewhere far away, a woman dips her fingers into a bowl of peppermint oil. Somewhere else, a child spits into the sand, his grandmother nodding in approval. Not everything needs to be written down to last. Some things are stronger when passed hand to hand. The forgotten healers weren't forgotten. They were remembered in every cleaned mouth, every soothed child, every smile that lasted one more day. And now, you remember them, too.